The mighty Eternal Empire had conquered 500 worlds. For 10,000 years, their fleets ruled the stars with unchallenged might, their name a whisper of fear across the galaxy. But on one quiet morning, as the great Imperial flagship Eternal Dawn tore through hyperspace and emerged like a steel mountain against the void, the impossible happened. They met humans. The ship's gleaming hull stretched for 12 kilometers, surrounded by an armada of perfect formation, each vessel armed with weapons capable of burning worlds to ash. On the command deck, Grand Admiral Vale stood in cold silence as the sensor officer reported the discovery. 5 human ships, each barely 400 meters long, mining near an asteroid belt. Primitive. Defenseless. Transmit the standard ultimatum, Vale ordered with quiet certainty. A brilliant pulse of golden energy carried the Empire's message across the stars, a decree of surrender spoken in the voice of a god. The officers waited for the familiar response, panic, cries, or worship. But instead, through the comms came a burst of static. And then laughter, not nervous or fearful, but genuine laughter. Raw, human, unstoppable. "What the hell is this, a prank?" one voice said between gasps of amusement. "Guys, you gotta hear this. Some aliens think they're space emperors." Another voice joined in, laughing harder, spilling coffee as the human crews found the entire situation absurd. On the Eternal Dawn, silence fell like a blade. The bridge crew exchanged stunned looks. No conquered species had ever dared laugh at the Empire. Vale's perfect posture faltered. "Are they laughing at us?" he whispered. And in that moment, the Eternal Empire, the architects of fear and dominion, realized that their greatest power meant nothing to a species that could laugh in the face of the impossible. That was the day the Empire learned that laughter could conquer fear. The mighty Eternal Empire had conquered 500 worlds. For 10,000 years, their fleets ruled the stars with absolute authority. Civilizations rose and fell beneath the shadow of their banners. None dared to resist them. None even imagined laughter in their presence. But on one quiet morning, the grand Imperial flagship Eternal Dawn emerged from hyperspace near the Sol asteroid belt, its vast hull glinting like a blade in the starlight. The ship was 12 kilometers long, bristling with cannons and hangars capable of reducing a planet to cinders. Around it, hundreds of Imperial warships followed in flawless formation, a storm of steel and light stretching across the void. Within the command deck, polished to perfection, Grand Admiral Vale stood at the heart of it all, tall, sharp, and utterly sure of his superiority. He gazed upon the blue tactical displays that mapped the surrounding space. A young officer spoke, his voice steady but reverent. "Admiral, primitive human vessels detected near the asteroid belt. 5 ships, mining class, unarmed." Vale's thin lips curved into a confident smile. "Primitive," he repeated, almost amused. "How fitting." Ready the broadcast. A shimmering golden pulse of energy surged from the Eternal Dawn, carrying the Empire's standard ultimatum, a message spoken in the voice of a god. "This is Grand Admiral Vale of the Eternal Empire," his words echoed across the void. "You are trespassing in Imperial space. Surrender immediately or be destroyed." On the bridge, silence followed. The officers exchanged knowing looks. They'd seen this scene countless times before: panic, fear, desperate pleas. Every world folded the same way. Vale clasped his hands behind his back, ready to watch another easy victory. But seconds turned into minutes, and instead of screams, only static returned. Then suddenly a human voice came through, calm, casual, almost bored. Say again? You're who now?" The Imperial officers frowned. Vale's expression hardened. "Repeat the transmission," he ordered. The ultimatum echoed again, colder, sharper this time. "Surrender immediately or be destroyed." Aboard the human ship Olympus, Admiral James Porter leaned back in his chair, coffee mug in hand, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. The bridge around him was quiet, the crew half listening as they monitored mining operations. "Did that guy just say Eternal Empire?" one technician asked, stifling a laugh. Porter took a slow sip of his coffee and raised an eyebrow. "Sounds like someone's been watching too much space opera," he said. Another officer snorted. "Should we, surrender, sir?" Porter grinned. "Yeah, sure. After breakfast." He turned to the communications officer. "Patch me through. Let's hear our new overlords out." The channel opened again, and Porter's calm, amused voice filled the Imperial command deck. This is Admiral James Porter of the United Earth Fleet vessel Olympus. Could you repeat that message, please? We want to record it for posterity. On the eternal dawn, the silence was deafening. Vale blinked, as if unsure whether he had heard correctly. Record it. For posterity? He muttered, stunned. His officers looked equally confused. No one had ever responded this way. Admiral, the comms officer said hesitantly. They appear to be mocking us. Vale's jaw tightened. Open all channels, he commanded. Let them understand who they are dealing with. But before he could continue, Porter's voice returned, dripping with humor. Just so we're clear, you're the Eternal Empire, right? Conquerors of 500 worlds? Sounds exhausting. You guys need a vacation. Laughter broke out on the human bridge, echoing faintly through the transmission. Someone in the background added, Tell them to send their fleet commander our coordinates. We'll trade him for a box of donuts. On the Imperial Bridge, disbelief turned to outrage. Officers looked to Vale for direction, but the Grand Admiral's face was unreadable, torn between fury and confusion. Are they laughing at us? He asked quietly. No one dared to answer. The communication channel remained open, letting the sound of human laughter drift through the silent halls of the Empire's greatest warship. For the first time in 10,000 years, their power meant nothing. Vale straightened, his voice a low growl. Prepare to fire a warning shot, he ordered. Let them see the difference between gods and insects. But before the command could be carried out, the human voice returned once more, cheerful as ever. Hold that thought, Empire boy, Porter said. You're aiming at a bunch of mining ships. If you blow up my asteroid field, you'll owe me for the minerals. Galactic law, you know. Trade violation. The human bridge erupted in more laughter. Porter sipped his coffee again and leaned back. Anyway, feel free to stop by if you want to talk about this Eternal Empire thing. Bring snacks. Then, with a casual flick of his hand, he ended the transmission. On the eternal dawn, the Imperial officers sat frozen. The silence was heavy, the kind that could swallow galaxies. Vale's confident smile was gone. For the first time in his long, unbroken career of conquest, he felt something entirely unfamiliar. Doubt. Humanity had not cowered. They had not pleaded. They had laughed. The Grand Admiral stared out into the void where the tiny human ships floated peacefully, utterly unafraid. In that moment, he realized that all the Empire's power, all its fleets, its weapons, its history of terror, meant nothing to a species that could find humor in the face of annihilation. That day would be remembered in Imperial history not as a battle, but as a revelation. The day the Eternal Empire met humanity. And the galaxy's mightiest power crumbled before laughter. The mighty Eternal Empire had ruled the stars for 10,000 years, their power unmatched, their word law. They had crushed 500 civilizations beneath their banners and erased countless species who dared to resist. To them, this corner of space, this insignificant solar system, was just another conquest waiting to happen. When the Imperial flagship Eternal Dawn emerged from hyperspace, its polished hull shimmered like a blade against the darkness. 12 kilometers of armor and weaponry, accompanied by 1,000 escort ships, formed a formation so perfect it looked choreographed by gods. On the command deck, Grand Admiral Vale stood tall, his cold eyes fixed on the glowing tactical display. Admiral, reported his sensor officer, primitive human vessels detected near the asteroid belt. 5 ships mining class unarmed. Vale's smile was almost bored. Primitive, he said softly. Send them the standard message. Let them know they are now subjects of the Eternal Empire. A pulse of golden energy streaked through the void. The Empire's voice carried across the stars. This is Grand Admiral Vale of the Eternal Empire. You are trespassing in Imperial space. Surrender immediately or be destroyed. The crew waited for the familiar response. Panic, begging, surrender. But instead, silence. Then a click of static, followed by a voice so casual it was almost offensive. Say again. Surrender or be what? The voice chuckled. Could you repeat that? We want to record it for posterity. Confused murmurs rippled through the Imperial bridge. Vale frowned. They mock us, he whispered. Play it again. The message repeated, sharper this time, laced with Imperial arrogance. Surrender immediately or be destroyed. Aboard the human flagship Olympus, Admiral James Porter sipped his coffee, watching the message replay on the holo display. His bridge crew was barely containing their laughter. One of his officers finally broke the silence, snorting, "Did they just threaten us with that museum piece?" The room erupted. Another crewman pointed at the incoming scans projected before them. "Oh, wait, that's adorable. They've got Mark 7 plasma arrays. Haven't seen one of those since I was a kid." Porter smirked and leaned back in his chair. "Mark 7s, that's, what, 40 years out of date?" The laughter grew louder. Guess the galaxy's so big the Empire missed the memo about modern tech. One technician added through a grin, "Maybe we should donate them an upgrade. Charity for ancient conquerors." On the Eternal Dawn, every Imperial officer froze. "Admiral," the communications officer stammered, "they've identified our weapons by name." Vale's eyes narrowed. Impossible. No primitive species could recognize Imperial military hardware. His voice trembled with disbelief. "Run another scan. I want to know how they have that knowledge." But the readings didn't lie. The human ship showed nothing but weak energy signatures, minimal shielding, outdated propulsion. They looked harmless. "They're bluffing," Vale hissed. "They must have stolen this data." Meanwhile, aboard the Olympus, Porter's crew was still laughing. "Should we respond, sir?" one asked between chuckles. Porter nodded. "Oh, definitely. Let's have some fun." He leaned toward the comms unit, his voice calm and dry. "To the Eternal Empire. This is Admiral James Porter of the United Earth Fleet. Impressive entrance, by the way. Love the symmetry. But those plasma arrays of yours, bit nostalgic. They were cutting edge when my grandfather was still in diapers." The humans could barely hold in their laughter as he continued, "We'd offer to upgrade your targeting systems, but we're not sure your processors can handle it." The words hit the Eternal Dawn like a hammer. Vale's officers exchanged looks of panic and confusion. How do they know our systems?" one whispered. Vale's voice turned sharp. "Scan their ships again. There must be hidden weapon signatures, something we missed." The sensors pulsed, data flickering across the screens. And suddenly, something strange appeared. Faint distortions, impossible readings, fields of energy beyond comprehension. "Admiral," the chief scientist stammered, "their energy output. It's impossible. Their reactors are cloaked. Quantum signatures far beyond our understanding." Vale's confident facade cracked. "Cloaked?" he repeated. The officer nodded shakily. "Yes, sir. Their ships, they're not mining vessels at all." The display flickered, revealing hidden outlines of massive, invisible constructs embedded within the mining hulls. Ships of elegant, alien design, their true power veiled beneath harmless exteriors. Each one, the scientist whispered, could outgun the entire fleet. Aboard the Olympus, Porter and his crew watched the Imperial fleet with amused detachment. "Looks like they're finally noticing," a pilot said. Porter smiled, swirling his coffee lazily. "Took them long enough." He stood and stretched, the quiet confidence of a man completely in control. "Send them a final message," he said. The comms officer grinned and opened the channel. Porter's voice filled the Imperial bridge once again. Light, calm, almost friendly. "Eternal Empire, huh? Cute name. But next time you threaten someone, make sure your weapons aren't older than their kids' toys." The transmission cut off. Silence swallowed the Eternal Dawn. The bridge crew stared at the holographic display of the primitive human ships, now realizing those tiny specks weren't helpless miners. They were gods in disguise. For the first time in its history, the Eternal Empire felt fear. Vale's perfect posture slumped slightly as he whispered to himself, "What have we found?" And aboard the Olympus, Admiral Porter smiled faintly, setting his coffee cup down. "Relax, people. They'll figure it out," he said. Eventually. Laughter once again filled the bridge, echoing across the stars. The sound of humanity, unfazed and unstoppable, meeting the galaxy's most powerful empire with nothing but wit, confidence, and a good cup of coffee. The Eternal Dawn hung in the dark like a steel god, its vast hull glowing with the power of ages. For 10,000 years, the Eternal Empire had ruled through fear. Their fleets unmatched, their weapons legendary, their arrogance absolute. But now, facing 5 small mining ships from a backwater species called humans, that confidence was beginning to crack. Grand Admiral Vale stood on his command deck, fists clenched behind his back, staring at the tactical screens that displayed those infuriatingly calm vessels. Every insult, every laugh still echoed in his mind. Enough, he said finally, voice cold as iron. Prepare the star splitter. Gasps rippled through the bridge. The star splitter, the Empire's most sacred weapon, a sun-killing beam capable of destroying entire planetary systems, had not been used in 1,000 years. But Vale's pride burned brighter than caution. If these humans wish to mock the Empire, he hissed, let them mock the light that unmade worlds. Deep within the ship's core, colossal reactors roared to life. Energy conduits flared as the eternal dawn began to charge the ancient weapon. The void around it shimmered with power. Across the human frequencies, the buildup was impossible to miss, a blinding sphere of energy forming at the heart of the Empire's flagship. But on the bridge of the Olympus, Admiral James Porter looked entirely unconcerned. He leaned casually on the arm of his chair, sandwich in hand, watching the readings rise. So, he said around a bite of bread, anyone want to take bets on how long it takes to charge? His bridge crew chuckled. I give it 5 minutes before it overheats, said one. 10 before it misfires, added another. Porter nodded thoughtfully. Now these guys are dramatic. Call it 7.5. Laughter filled the human bridge as the star splitter continued to glow brighter and brighter. A weapon of myth. Now the punchline of a lunch break. On the eternal dawn, the final charge indicators flared crimson. Weapon at full power, Admiral, reported the weapons officer, awe and fear mixing in his tone. Target locked, human vessel designated Olympus. Vale raised his hand. Fire. A beam of blinding light tore across space, pure energy condensed into a single devastating strike. The stars themselves seemed to dim as the star splitter unleashed its fury. The Imperial Bridge erupted in cheers, officers standing proud, certain of victory. The display flared white, then cleared, and the human ships were still there, perfectly intact. Not a single scratch. Did anyone feel anything? Someone asked aboard the Olympus. Nope, replied a crewman, stirring his coffee. Though I swear this tastes better now. Porter glanced at his mug and smirked. Yeah, must have been the extra energy boost. The room broke into laughter again. Another officer looked at the readings, raising an eyebrow. Huh. Looks like the beam's energy output got absorbed by our shield array. It automatically rerouted the excess power into the life support grid. So that's why the lights flickered, someone said. Porter nodded. And apparently the coffee machines. He lifted his cup for a sip, savoring the taste. Perfect brew. Back on the eternal dawn, silence fell like a hammer. Vale stared in disbelief as the tactical screens confirmed the impossible. The humans hadn't even flinched. His ultimate weapon, a construct of divine power, had bounced off invisible shields like a child's toy. No, he whispered, no. That's not possible. The science officer's voice trembled. Admiral, their energy matrix. It reflected the entire beam. There's no measurable damage. Vale's voice broke with fury. Then what happened to the energy? Aboard the Olympus, laughter roared again as a communications officer tapped the mic. Eternal Empire, she said between giggles. Thanks for the power boost. The Olympus now runs entirely on your attack. Much appreciated, Porter added. Deadpan. Oh, and by the way, the coffee's perfect. You guys should try it sometime. The entire human bridge was laughing so hard half of them were crying. Someone quickly snapped a hollow pic of their steaming mugs and captioned it, The Empire shot first and then all I got was perfect coffee. Within minutes, it spread across the human network, turning the most feared superweapon in history into a meme. Meanwhile, aboard the Eternal Dawn, humiliation spread like fire. Officers avoided Vale's gaze. The air was thick with disbelief. The Grand Admiral, conqueror of 500 worlds, stood frozen, his empire's pride shattered by a species that laughed in the face of destruction and turned their ultimate weapon into a joke. The humans, meanwhile, reclined comfortably in orbit, drinking their freshly brewed coffee as the shattered morale of the Empire rippled through the stars. Admiral Porter took another sip, his voice calm and amused. You know, he said, for galactic tyrants, they make a great cup of coffee. That day would be remembered forever, not as a battle, but as a humiliation so absolute that the Eternal Empire never recovered from it. The day humanity turned a sunkiller into a coffee maker, and laughed while doing it. The Eternal Dawn drifted in uneasy silence, its once invincible presence now humbled by the absurdity of what it faced. Grand Admiral Vale stood before the tactical display, his jaw tight, his pride still stinging from the failure of the star splitter. The humans, those infuriatingly calm, laughing creatures, were still there, their so-called mining vessels floating lazily near the asteroid belt as if nothing had happened. "Begin a full spectrum analysis," Vale ordered coldly. "I want to know everything about those ships. Their weaknesses, their energy sources, their structure, everything." His officers obeyed instantly. The Imperial scanning arrays powered up, beams of invisible energy sweeping across the void, probing the human vessels for any trace of vulnerability. On the bridge of the Olympus, Admiral James Porter noticed immediately. "Ah," he said, watching a faint shimmer flicker across the sensors. "They're scanning us again." A grin spread across his face. "All right, team. Let's give them something fun to look at." The crew chuckled as the ship's AI hummed mischievously, projecting carefully crafted data overlays. Not lies, but creative nonsense. Within seconds, the Imperial analysts were flooded with readings that made absolutely no sense. "Admiral," one analyst on the Eternal Dawn stammered, staring at her console. "Their ship's interior volume. It's expanding." Vale turned sharply. "Expanding? What do you mean, expanding?" "Sir," she said, blinking in disbelief, "their ship is bigger on the inside. Spatial distortion ratios are off the charts. It shouldn't be physically possible." Another officer called out, "Their systems are rerouting our scan energy, Admiral. They're powering internal circuits with it." "What circuits?" Vale barked. The officer hesitated. "They're entertainment systems." Back aboard the Olympus, the humans were relaxed and laughing, reclining in their chairs as the massive Imperial scans continued. "They're powering our entertainment grid, sir," said the engineer. "Netflix is now running on Imperial scanner juice." Porter raised his coffee mug with a grin. "Well, that's one way to save energy." "What's playing?" "Classic sci-fi, sir. Space Conquerors the Three." "How fitting," Porter said with a smirk. Meanwhile, confusion spread across the Eternal Dawn's command deck. "Admiral," shouted another analyst. "New readings. Their ships have multiple propulsion systems." "Multiple?" Vale repeated, leaning forward. "How many?" "5, sir," the analyst said, eyes wide. "And one of them seems to be powered by laughter." The bridge fell silent. Vale blinked, certain he'd misheard. "Laughter," he said slowly. The analyst nodded miserably. "Yes, Admiral. Their ship's quantum core converts emotional energy into propulsion. Every time they laugh, their efficiency increases." A nervous murmur rippled through the crew. "That's impossible." "And it gets worse," another officer added, his tone bewildered. "We're detecting recreational structures inside their ships." Vale turned, his patience cracking. "What kind of structures?" The officer hesitated. "There's a water park with slides and a wave pool." Someone at the back of the bridge coughed to hide a laugh. "And," the officer continued, voice trembling, "we're picking up organic energy signatures. Dragons, sir. Actual dragons. Large, flying, fire-breathing life forms." Vale stared at the man in silence, every trace of color draining from his face. "You're telling me," he said slowly, "that the so-called primitive species not only reflects our weapons, hijacks our scanners for recreation, but also keeps mythical beasts and amusement parks aboard their warships?" The officer swallowed hard. "And quantum ice cream makers, sir." Vale's composure finally cracked. "Quantum what?" "Ice cream makers, Admiral," the analyst confirmed. "They appear to convert temporal energy fluctuations into frozen desserts. Multiple flavors." Aboard the Olympus, the crew was in hysterics watching the chaos unfold. Porter leaned back in his chair, watching the incoming Imperial transmissions. "They've figured out the dragons," said one of his officers, barely able to speak through laughter. "And the ice cream," Porter smiled. "Good. That'll really bake their circuits." Another crew member chimed in. "Sir, should we let them see the zero-gravity roller coaster next?" "Nah," Porter said, waving it off. "Let them think we're eccentric, not insane." On the Eternal Dawn, the Imperial bridge had descended into chaos. Officers argued over impossible readings. One insisted the humans had built pocket dimensions inside their ships. Another swore the laughter-powered engine was a metaphor for some unknown energy form. And Vale, once the most feared commander in the galaxy, could only stand there, staring at the data that mocked everything he thought he knew about technology, logic, and control. They defy reason, he muttered. They defy everything. Back on the Olympus, Porter finished his coffee and stood, gazing out at the Imperial fleet. You know, he said casually, for a galactic empire, they're taking this remarkably poorly. The crew laughed again, the sound echoing through the ship, bright, human, and utterly unstoppable. Their laughter rippled through the quantum fields of their engines, making the lights shimmer playfully. Porter grinned. Let's give them one last scan for the road. Make sure they see the dragons playing in the water park. And as the Imperial sensors locked on again, the Eternal Dawn screens filled with impossible visuals. Dragons diving through zero-gravity waterfalls. Humans eating quantum ice cream. Children laughing beside roaring engines of impossible design. The most powerful empire in the galaxy watched, speechless as the so-called primitive species turned. Every scan into a comedy show, that was the day the Eternal Empire stopped trying to understand humanity and started fearing what laughter could build. The Eternal Dawn drifted ominously near the asteroid belt, its immense hull reflecting distant starlight, yet inside tension simmered more than ever. After repeated failures, the star splitter bounced harmlessly off invisible shields. Imperial scans revealed water parks, dragons, and quantum ice cream makers aboard the human ships. Grand Admiral Vale finally demanded a direct meeting. The Eternal Empire's pride was wounded, their authority questioned for the first time in 10,000 years. Send someone to speak with them, Vale said, voice low but cutting, and make sure the message is clear. The Empire does not tolerate insolence. The order was relayed across subspace with lethal precision, the Empire's most fearsome voice echoing across the void. On the human side, the response arrived almost immediately. A single name delivered with perfect casualness. Tom Wilson, retired history teacher. The Olympus crew stifled laughter as they prepared the channel. Sir? One officer asked nervously. He teaches history. That's it? Porter leaned back, smiling faintly. Exactly. That's all they need to know. Let's go. The channel opened and an unassuming human man in his 70s appeared, reading glasses perched on his nose, cardigan slightly wrinkled, cup of tea in hand. Hello, he said cheerfully. Tom Wilson. Nice to meet you. The Imperial bridge erupted with confusion. The holographic figure of a retired teacher was not what any of them expected. No threatening aura, no flashing war insignia, nothing resembling a commander. Explain yourself, Vale barked, trying to reclaim some shred of dignity. Tom adjusted his glasses and smiled. Well, let's start with the obvious. Humanity has been traveling faster than light for 3,000 years. There was a pause, a stunned silence as Imperial officers tried to process this. Vale's jaw tightened. 3,000 years? He muttered. You've been doing this before we even had warp arrays? Tom nodded, sipping his tea. Yep. We watched your empire develop almost like a nature documentary. Thousands of years of conquest, 500 worlds, armies, fleets, banners, and all very impressive, really. We just watched, took notes, made some observations, even set up tourist spots along common Imperial routes. Great for stargazers. The Imperial officers stared in disbelief. Tourist spots? Vale repeated, voice cracking. You've been monitoring us for entertainment? Exactly, Tom said with a shrug. Best seats in the galaxy. Nice viewing angles. Great photo ops of fleets entering hyperspace. The snacks are decent too. Panic and fury rippled across the Eternal Dawn. Vale's perfect composure shattered as he realized the enormity of it. For 10,000 years, the mightiest empire in the galaxy had been playing into someone else's aquarium. You mean all this time we've been living in your galaxy aquarium? He demanded, voice trembling. Tom nodded gently, adjusting his teacup. Yep. We even keep logs of Imperial tactics, breeding behaviors, fleet formations. Fascinating stuff. You're all so predictable. Very reliable subjects. The officers murmured, some clutching their heads. Vale's fists clenched, trembling with rage, disbelief. and the sting of humiliation. "This cannot be possible," he said, voice almost a whisper. Tom leaned back casually, as if discussing the weather instead of a super empire's entire military history. "It's true. But don't worry, we're careful. No one gets hurt, unless they make really bad decisions. But it's been a long time since anyone tried to attack the snack bar." Highly discouraged. The humans on the Olympus laughed quietly behind him, sipping tea, watching the Imperial fleet squirm. Porter raised an eyebrow. "See, Admiral Vale? You're part of the exhibit. Might I suggest a gift shop? Tourists love merchandise." The Grand Admiral, once feared across 500 worlds, now looked small. A relic in a galaxy designed and observed by a species that had long since mastered the stars and turned empires into entertainment. His bridge crew averted their eyes, unsure whether to obey, flee, or simply faint. Tom Wilson smiled warmly. "Don't take it personally. You're excellent at your part, very theatrical. Some of our best students even reenact your battles for fun. Very educational." Vale's fists unclenched slowly, his mind spinning. The Empire had ruled countless species, crushed rebellions, destroyed worlds, and yet here it was, humbled by a retired human history teacher sipping tea. And in that moment, across the void of space, the Imperial fleet understood the truth. For all their power, their weapons, their fear, and their centuries of conquest, they were merely part of humanity's galaxy-scale amusement park. The revelation hung in the stars like a punchline the Empire could not survive. The eternal dawn hung in the void, its massive bulk a monument to centuries of conquest, yet the mood aboard was far from triumphant. After repeated embarrassments, from the Star Splitter bouncing harmlessly off invisible shields to Imperial scans revealing dragons, water parks, and quantum ice cream makers, Grand Admiral Vale had reluctantly agreed to a meeting with humanity. Across the subspace channel appeared Tom Wilson, retired history teacher, sipping tea and smiling as if nothing in the galaxy could trouble him. "Hello again," he said warmly, "and welcome. Please don't stand. It's a long trip to the snack table anyway." Imperial officers stiffened, their pride bristling, yet Tom's casual demeanor was disarming. Then, almost casually, he held out a holographic tray. "Cookies?" he offered. "Baked in a pocket dimension. They taste like your favorite memory." Murmurs rippled through the Imperial crew. The idea was absurd, almost impossible, and yet the cookies hovered in mid-space, the scent carrying faintly through comms. "Now don't get the wrong idea," Tom continued, breaking off a cookie and holding it up as if demonstrating a simple trick. "We're not mocking you. Watching your empire grow has been fascinating, like observing our own ancient history. You're impressive, truly. You conquer worlds, build fleets, create fear. All very instructive." Vale's jaw tightened, struggling to reconcile centuries of power with this light, almost domestic amusement. Meanwhile, the humans aboard the Olympus were completely at ease, passing cookies around and sipping tea as if the galaxy's most feared empire were nothing more than a neighbor dropping by for dessert. As the Imperial analysts continued to struggle, with scans that revealed nothing intelligible, Tom leaned casually back in his chair and waved toward a corner of the human ship. "Oh, that's Bob," he said, indicating a massive, vaguely amorphous entity slithering gently through the zero-gravity observation deck. Its form shimmered with shifting cosmic energy, an impossible mix of scale, tentacles, and glowing eyes. The Imperial scientists gasped. "It's eating reality?" one whispered. Tom chuckled. "Sometimes he tries," he admitted, "but he's actually excellent at chess. You'd love him, very disciplined, and friendly once you understand him." Porter added with a grin. "Don't worry, he only destroys the small bits of reality that are redundant, mostly just taxes and bad paperwork." Laughter erupted across the human bridge as Bob lazily extended a tendril, nudging a floating teacup. Vale's officers frantically tried to log and make sense of the readings. "Admiral, this entity, this Bob, it's impossible. Its mass, energy signature, and temporal distortion." "Ignore the impossibility. Tom interjected cheerfully. "We've got 5 more like him wandering the ship. And don't worry, they all play board games and help with the dishwasher." Another human crew member popped in. "Bob's favorite? Chess. Highly competitive. Always beats the captain." The Imperial scientist stared, trying to reconcile cosmic-scale terror with playful domesticity. Tom continued, offering more cookies as if the most natural thing in the universe were feeding the Empire's officers. "See, the thing about humans," he said with a gentle smile, "is we treat these cosmic horrors like pets. Don't take it personally. You're fascinating, yes, but also just amusing to observe. We've had billions of years to perfect this, controlling energy, life, even things that are technically predatory forces of the cosmos. Bob just happens to be one of our favorites." Vale's fists clenched at the sheer audacity. The Empire had fought gods, conquered civilizations, and yet here it was, humbled by a retired human teaching history, handing out pocket dimension cookies, and casually introducing cosmic horrors as chess-playing companions. On the Olympus, the humans sipped tea, munched cookies, and watched the Imperial fleet fumble in awe and confusion. Tom leaned forward, resting his chin on his hand. "Honestly, the best part," he said quietly, "is watching you try to make sense of us. It's like archaeology and only live. You'll get used to it." Laughter echoed softly through the void, the faint shimmer of Bob curling lazily around the observation deck, the taste of pocket dimension cookies lingering in the minds of the Imperial officers who had never experienced anything like it. The Eternal Empire had mastered war, terror, and fear, but they were powerless in the face of human calm, curiosity, and whimsy. The Eternal Dawn hung in the void, its massive silhouette dwarfed not by enemy fire but by its own embarrassment. After decades of conquest, thousands of worlds subdued, and a reputation that spanned galaxies, the Empire had been utterly humiliated, their ultimate weapons nullified, their scanners outwitted, their pride shredded by a single species that laughed at the impossible. Grand Admiral Vale, face pale and jaw tight, finally opened a channel to the Olympus, voice carefully measured but tinged with desperation. We offer a formal alliance," he said, the weight of 10,000 years of dominance softening into reluctant civility. "Our fleets, our worlds, our technology, all at your disposal. Humanity, please accept it before we make further mistakes." On the human side, Admiral James Porter grinned and sipped his coffee. "Alliance?" he said lightly, leaning back in his chair. "Absolutely. Just one thing. Make sure your coffee machines are up to snuff first. Can't negotiate effectively on bad coffee." Laughter erupted across the human bridge as a crew member added, "Oh, and Jupiter's sentient now. Loves crossword puzzles. Would like to be included in future treaties." Tom Wilson, ever the historian, nodded sagely. "Yes, it's been keeping records of the Empire's comings and goings for centuries. Very diligent. You might want to bring it a pen." The Imperial officers gaped, unsure whether to be offended, terrified, or both. Across the galaxy, news of humanity's audacious triumph spread like a supernova. Other species, long oppressed by Imperial rule, began reaching out to Earth for alliances, treaties, and protection. Star systems that had trembled at the sight of the Eternal Dawn now sought passports to the human fleet. Merchants, scientists, explorers, and former Imperial bureaucrats flocked to humanity's orbit, eager to align themselves with the species that had tamed dragons, powered ships with laughter, and turned superweapons into coffee makers. Galactic trade routes shifted, military contracts rewired, and political power pivoted overnight. Back aboard the Olympus, Porter sipped another cup of coffee, watching as distant fleets altered course toward Earth. "Well," he said casually, "looks like we're the center of the galaxy now. Better upgrade those coffee machines again." Tom Wilson chuckled, offering another batch of pocket dimension cookies. "And don't forget diplomacy with Jupiter. Crossword puzzle treaties are surprisingly binding." Laughter rippled through the human bridge as the ships of former empires and rebellious species began assembling in orbit, eager to take part in the new galactic order. Meanwhile, the Eternal Dawn, once a symbol of terror and conquest, now floated in quiet reflection. Vale's officers whispered nervously about fleet redeployment, political ramifications, and the absurdity of being bested by a retired history teacher and a species that approached the cosmos with whimsy and humor. Humanity had not just survived, it had turned the entire galaxy upside down, shifting alliances, establishing dominance, and doing so with charm, laughter, and impeccable coffee. Earth, once a minor backwater planet, now sat at the very center of everything, its influence stretching across star systems, fleets, and species in a web of cheerful power that no one, not even the Eternal Empire, could undo. The galaxy shimmered with a new light, a peaceful energy born not of conquest but of unexpected camaraderie. In a sweeping montage, the humans were everywhere, their curiosity and ingenuity shaping the new era. On distant Imperial stations, human engineers and teachers guided the formerly arrogant scientists of the Eternal Empire, showing them elegant methods for energy optimization, quantum computing, and even proper coffee brewing techniques. Imperial officers, once rigid and unyielding, bent over holographic displays with wonder, following human instructions, taking notes, and occasionally laughing at their own mistakes. Warships that had once shattered planets were now grounded as museums, their decks filled with young species exploring the halls, reading plaques detailing the battles that once terrified entire civilizations, and marveling at the artistry of weapons now rendered harmless. On planets across the galaxy, schools held special events like Bring Your Imperial Friend to School Day, where children guided towering Imperial officers through classrooms, showing them science projects, playground games, and pocket dimension art installations. The once feared soldiers learned humility and play, sitting cross-legged on floors far too small for their frames, laughing as miniature humans and alien students explained physics and art in ways that no military academy ever could. On Earth, in a quiet observatory-turned-cafe, Grand Admiral Vale sipped a steaming cup of coffee while a massive dragon, shimmering with cosmic energy and impossibly graceful, curled nearby. The dragon nuzzled the Admiral gently, and he scratched behind its ear, finally smiling him a small, genuine smile that had never appeared in the cold corridors of the Eternal Dawn. Voiceover carried over the montage, calm and reflective. In the end, the Empire didn't fall through war or rebellion. It didn't crumble under force or fear. It learned to laugh. In that laughter, it discovered humility, curiosity, and progress. The galaxy had not been conquered by humans. It had been transformed by them. Technology, wisdom, and wonder now flowed freely, and species who once quaked under the Empire's shadow found guidance, inspiration, and friendship instead. Scenes of unity continued. Human engineers tweaking Imperial reactors to optimize efficiency, alien families picnicking beside dragons who gently floated in the sky, classrooms filled with laughter as miniature simulations of starships danced across holo displays. The Eternal Empire, once a symbol of fear, had become a partner in exploration, curiosity, and joy. Vale raised his cup to the vast expanse of stars, the cosmic horizon reflecting in his eyes. Perhaps, the voiceover concluded, the true power of the galaxy lies not in domination, but in the courage to laugh, to learn, and to share it with others. The camera drifts slowly through the sparkling expanse of the galaxy, showing glimpses of laughter-filled classrooms, dragons curled around observatories, and humans sharing knowledge with once terrified Imperial officers. Grand Admiral Vale sips coffee beside his pet dragon, students and former soldiers alike laughing in quiet harmony across the stars. The voiceover, warm and reflective, begins. Sometimes the greatest power in the galaxy isn't a weapon. It isn't the size of your fleets or the terror you can inspire. No, it's a smile, a perfectly brewed cup of coffee, and the courage to laugh at yourself. The montage continues. Children flying in zero-gravity classrooms, holographic maps of the galaxy lighting up with cooperation and discovery, and once feared fleets now transformed into museums and exploration vessels. The scene slowly fades to the end card, soft music playing. As the narrator concludes, if you enjoyed this story, like, subscribe, and share for more tales of cosmic irony. The screen lingers on the stars, peaceful and infinite, as the laughter of humanity echoes across the galaxy, leaving the Eternal Empire and all who watch forever changed.